Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, June 23rd, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Frank Clark has been arrested twice this offseason for gun possession charges, both times in Los Angeles, and he was in a car both times. The latest incident occurred on Sunday. On today's show, Chiefs beat writer Sam McDowell, who is covering the story for the Star, reviews the news and breaks down what might be next for the defensive end who has spent 2 years with the Chiefs. We discuss the NFL's personal conduct policy and where things can go from here for Clark. So let's get started. On Monday, Herbie, Teope, and I joked that with minicamp over and training camp off in the distance, that the only thing left to report on the Chiefs were arrests. Ha, 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 as if there would be any. Little did we know that not only would there be one, but there had already been one. And just the day before, and Sam McDowell, as you discovered, there had been two arrests of Frank Clark. And I want to start by having you take us through the arrest and where Frank Clark was, what the charges are, and then we'll talk about where he and the Chiefs go from here.
Yeah, sure. So he was arrested initially on March 13th in West Carson, California, which is south of LA. Let's start off by saying both of these cases have a lot of similarities to them. Both of these incidents, in the sense that he was in a vehicle. Now, in the March arrest, they would not tell us whether he was driving or whether or not the other guy who was arrested was driving. But in both cases, he's in a vehicle. That vehicle's pulled over for some sort of code violation. And then during the process of that traffic stop, an officer says that he spots a gun in the back seat sticking out of a duffel bag, searches the car, and finds a weapon, which is illegal under California law. It's a felony. So in the March arrest, he's in West Carson, California, which is south of LA, and they end up finding two loaded guns, a handgun and a rifle. He's with another gentleman, Charles Philip Smith. And just on Sunday, he's arrested under similar circumstances in which he's pulled over for another vehicle code violation. This is in LA, just south of downtown. And officers claim that they observed an Uzi, according to a spokesperson for the LAPD. And he's arrested again. And in both cases, he's released on $35,000 bond. So like I said, a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, there are. The very first of which is somebody is having issues driving because whether he was in the driver's seat the first time or the other person, they did something to get pulled, and he was driving the second time, correct? And he did something to get pulled. So that's it, to be stopped twice since in the last three or 4 months means driving skills. I don't know if it wasn't a routine check, a traffic stop or something like that. But the other more obvious thing is the gun in the car, the guns in the first incident, and then the Uzi in the second incident were exposed. They were in sight. If that had not been the case, if the bag had been zipped up in both cases, if the guns weren't obvious or could not be seen, we wouldn't have this conversation, would we?
Yeah, I mean, if the guns had been in the trunk, for example, I will say it's going to be important for us to point out that we haven't heard Frank Clark's side of what happened.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, we are reading from police reports, and so this is in one case, it's California Highway Patrol in the March arrest. In the other case, it's LAPD's version of the events and Sunday's arrest. So There are two different cars. So there's a Supra, Toyota 1993 Toyota Supra, and the March one and it was pulled over for not having allegedly not having a front license plate. And so then the one on Sunday, LAPD would just tell us that it was a code violation, a vehicle code violation, and would not elaborate beyond that. But that was, the Lamborghini SUV that he was driving in that case. And they do say he was driving in that case. They would, like I said, they wouldn't tell us, California Highway Patrol would not tell us if he was driving in March.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that up. So it was code, basically not having a license plate and then a code violation, not poor driving or
right.
Right. It wasn't a traffic stop or anything.
Right. It wasn't speeding or something like that.
Okay. Good to know. And we're sharing the information that is available to us through public records, requests. And you spoke to was it an LAPD spokesperson yesterday or recently, right, Sam?
Correct. For the Sunday arrest, we deal with this, Blair, because we're on the state line. So we understand that not every department does it the same. So we try and get records from Missouri, and it's a completely different process than getting them from Kansas. So we are dealing with two different jurisdictions here. So the LAPD on Sunday's arrest, the way that they do it is they won't give you any documents, but they'll read some stuff to you. In the case of March, we actually have the arrest report, and it's labeled that. I was told it's actually more like a summary of the arrest report. Because they redact some of the stuff that they gather during the arrest, and then they release a portion to you. But the portion does have, the details of what happened, and those are the details that we've mentioned here. They all come from that arrest report from the California Highway Patrol.
And I don't know and I don't know if many people know there are gun laws that differ from state to state, right? But as you mentioned earlier, what the reason that Clark was arrested was because he violated California law. I don't know if he would have, if in the same circumstance he would have violated Missouri or Kansas law with the guns in the car. Do you know that?
No, I don't know the answer to that. I've definitely seen people comment on that and have a take about whether or not this should or should not be illegal or something that you're arrested for, and especially particularly charged with a felony. All I know is that it is illegal in California. And there's actually a case going on right now that I think it's up to their appeals court that as far as whether or not an Uzi is illegal regardless, wherever you're carrying it, whether it's in your home, wherever in California. And like I said, there's some interpretations of the law that some people think that's not the case, and that's what's in court right now. But, the actual code that he violated, is in both cases in California law is 25-400A1, and that literally says a person is guilty of carrying a concealed firearm when the person does any of the following. And like I said, his is number one on this list. Carries concealed within any vehicle that is under the person's control. So that's what the arresting charge was there.
So, while you've got the California law book out, what's the code for bad judgment? Because that's what we're really dealing with here. For it to happen a second time, I mean, it shouldn't have happened the first time, but once it did, and we're out of the realm of fact and now just talking about this. But once it happens the first time, shouldn't that register that? You've gotten in trouble, you've been arrested for possession, and don't you learn the lesson from that and not do it a second time?
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what, even beyond what we might think, what the NFL might view this as. We have talked to Brian McCarthy, their spokesperson, who says that they are going to review this under their personal conduct policy, which is just the standard statement that we receive from the NFL and these sorts of things. We received the same statement 3 months ago when the Britt Reed incident happened the week of the Super Bowl. But I wonder if certainly they're going to view this differently if both of these cases, if he ends up being officially charged in both of these incidents. The NFL has a different standard than the court process does. Hypothetically, let's say that Frank Clark pleads these down. The NFL is still going to say we're going to look at the evidence on our own and then decide whether or not we suspend them. And so I would absolutely think that your point, Blair, as far as the 2 instead of 1, is going to make a difference with them.
I think so too. To be honest with you, I was trying to find some history of NFL player suspensions for gun violations, and there was an incident a couple of years ago with a running back, Alex Collins, who was suspended for 3 games. He was a running back for I believe the Ravens, but he also he was charged. He had possession of marijuana and possession of a handgun charged, and he only got probation from that. I should say only. It was 18 months probation from that, but was suspended for 3 games. There have been I think the Chiefs' own DeAndre Baker was involved with with a gun charge.
Yeah, his was an armed robbery that was eventually dropped,
dismissed. I think, right?
Yeah, and I've gone through that list as well, and the difficulty is there's not like an exact apples to apples comparison with what Frank Clark's going through. Like you just mentioned with Alex Collins, there a lot of guys have had this charge, but then there's also something extra to it, and it's hard to say which part of it that the NFL weighed more heavily whenever they levied a suspension.
And as you said, if it were just the one, we would maybe be looked at differently by the NFL. And let's make that clear too. The Chiefs don't suspend players. The NFL suspends players. It's a disciplinary, basically a council of the NFL, and they'll come up with the potential suspension for Frank Clark. But yeah, the second time I think gives the NFL more to consider here than what might have happened if it were just the March incident.
Absolutely.
So we didn't know about the March incident, Sam, until you did a little digging after TMZ reported the original story. And so I wondered if, first of all, we're having a guess here, because even if you ask the Chiefs a point blank question, they won't answer it. But did the Chiefs know about the first? Do you think the Chiefs knew about the first incident?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that officially. I do think it's possible that they did not. When we asked them for comment about the second, it's kind of funny because, like you mentioned, these are flipped. We knew about the second incident's what became public first when TMZ reported that on Monday. And we reached out to the Chiefs on that, and they said they were aware of the matter, but they weren't going to have a comment on it. And then in the process, like you mentioned, Blair, of trying to gather documents to get more information about that arrest, I discovered that there was a previous one in March. So of course we go back to the Chiefs and say, hey, we're going to update your comment because, your comment only applied to the Sunday's arrest. And they then said that they didn't have a comment at all. And so I don't know that we should read anything into that at all, but that's just the order of events that came about with the Chiefs. And I do think it's possible that just knowing how they operate, that it's possible we don't receive a comment on them until we get to training camp in a month.
That's right. And Frank Clark, will be there, and he spoke to the media. Was it not this past week, maybe the week before? And
yeah, he was one of the very last guys we spoke to about. I mean, he, the nature of his conversation was he was spending the entire off season just concentrating on football, and of course he didn't come to the voluntary workouts. They are voluntary. He does, which literally means he didn't have to come. But he didn't come to the voluntary workouts early portion of the off season. But he said during that press conference that all he was doing in the off season was concentrating on football.
Okay. You know, I'm careful. I'm trying to be careful here with what we say and how we say it. Um, the Chiefs haven't been, at least during the Andy Reid era, an organization that that uses incidents like this to make personnel decisions. Right? They don't. The player gets in trouble. They stand by. They tend to stand by the player and help them in any way. That's the admirable quality, I think, for the organization. So I'm wondering about Frank Clark's future here with the Chiefs. You know, he's an expensive player who probably has not lived up to his contract except for his postseason play, and that's especially 2 years ago in the Super Bowl victory run, it was exemplary. So you mentioned training camp, and I look, I think he'll be there, right? And no reason to think he won't be. And then when the season begins, whether he is serving a suspension or not, and even that, might not come into play, just because I think I read in your story the court appearance, or there's a court date set for mid-October, I believe.
Right, on the second charge, or on the second incident, I should say,
Yeah.
not on the second arrest. But we obviously Kareem Hunt was eventually released.
You're right.
But that stuff I feel like is dictated by a lot of times information that we don't have. The Chiefs are obviously going to have more information on these two arrests, but also they're going to have the order of events here, which is what they knew and when they knew it. And that became a key thing in the Kareem Hunt.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's information that we're not going to be privy to, that's going to be weighed pretty heavily, I think, in their decision about what to do with Frank Clark.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sam. Kareem Hunt basically was dishonest with the Chiefs about his incident, and that wasn't going to be tolerated by Clark Hunt and the organization. So season's off to a flying start for the Chiefs. This is usually the time of year when media creates lists and turns those into stories and rankings, and those become stories. And some of those are interesting. Heck, we'll do it. We'll have our own. I mean, I've seen Patrick Mahomes. What was he on Chris Sims' list of the best quarterbacks? NBC was touting that earlier this week, and Patrick Mahomes came up number 3 on a list of clutch players behind Aaron Rodgers. I forgot who number 2 was, but Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce also in the top 10. What have any of those lists or rankings caught your attention? And what do you think of them?
That must have been a real honor for Patrick Mahomes to be in the top 5.
Of any list, really.
Yeah. I'm not big into those lists unless they're written by our own Blair Kerkhoff and Pete Gradoffs, that we get our Hoffs, that we get you guys. We had a ton of those last summer, and I don't want to spoil it, but it seems like you guys got a couple coming. And when I say I don't want to spoil it, I mean I'm not going to put you guys on a deadline. So that if I mention it, you feel like it's got to come out next week.
That's right. But you're right. We are the list. The Hoffmeisters are the listmeisters. And
what's incredible is either you or Pete usually send out like something to the rest of the staff on, hey, do we make sure we're not forgetting stuff? And I always reply, but then I read the actual list and I'm like, well, God, I forgot 3/4 of these. But so somehow you guys haven't left one off yet, and maybe I should knock on wood when I say that. So when you come up with the best, the best players in Royals history, and I'm throwing that one out there because I know that's not one you're doing. You don't somehow forget George Brett or something.
I wouldn't put it past us. Yeah, Pete, or put it past me. Pete would catch it, but not. All right. So we talked to Herbie, as I mentioned, on Monday, and got Herbie's impressions of minicamp and really the entire, what I like to call spring football. I didn't get your impressions though. What, just generally speaking, the news that the Chiefs didn't make any news through minicamp. The news came, of course, the Monday after. But I don't know. I think it was, as I was mentioning to Herbie, they accomplished what they wanted to, right? Or at least when they say that they did, we have no reason to believe that's not the case.
Yeah, my top impression of minicamp is actually selfish for us, but I thought it was great just to be able to watch practice again. It's the first time that since they limited who was at training camp last year, I didn't go to training camp, and they didn't have mini camp. So it's the first time in over a year that I've actually been at Chiefs practice, and it was great. I mean, it was 95 degrees a couple of the days I went, and you were out there for an hour and a half, and I still just really enjoyed being out there. So it makes me look forward to training camp, of course, when those practices are 8 in the morning instead of 1 in the afternoon. But, player-wise, obviously you're looking at the rookies. Trey Smith is getting – I know we're not allowed to say who's lining up with which personnel group, but I think we are allowed to say that Trey Smith is getting a lot of reps. He's just on the field a lot. So I think he's a guy that's particularly intriguing, especially as the storyline of the offseason has been this offensive line. And it's just funny because we were writing about, Blair, there how much they had overhauled the offensive line before the draft. Now in June, I'm thinking that potentially 2 rookies could factor into this, even despite all the signings that they've had. I think Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, a couple of the guys that they got, in May in the draft could wind up being factors for this team.
I think Trey Smith was Herbie's surprise starter for game 1. So that would be a surprise based on where he was drafted and kind of his history, the history of injuries for him. So that's absolutely something to keep an eye on. How about the one sort of business item that remains is the Tyrann Mathieu contract extension. But the last impression, of course, was his comments when he met the media. And what was it he said? I can't see himself. I can't see myself wearing another uniform. I think that's more than the cryptic tweets. That's the idea and the notion that we should hang on to when we consider the Tyrann Mathieu Chiefs relationship.
Yeah, we've talked to him for 3 months about this now, or at least 2, and it's sort of been a roller coaster when you factor in the tweets with his press conferences. But the one consistent thing before last week was I hadn't heard him optimistic. I'd heard him frustrated. I had heard him pessimistic about this. And then last week, it was all optimism. And so, we know that they're talking. We know that this is a priority for the Chiefs. It's going to come down to the numbers. And I know we're getting closer and closer, and I've said this a lot, and the days are running out, but I still would be surprised if something's not done before training camp with Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, I agree. That's been the recent history of the Chiefs, is to get it done so there's nothing hanging over the team or the players' head going into St. Joe, which is where training camp's going to be. They're returning to St. Joe this July. All right, Sam, it was great catching up with you, and we all appreciate the information on Frank Clark, and I know that's a story that we'll continue to follow in the Kansas City Star. So appreciate the conversation, Sam. We'll do it again soon.
All right, thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Thanks to Sam McDowell for stopping by and talking about the Chiefs and Frank Clark. Links to stories about this incident can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, got another deal for you. You can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. Sports Pass is the online version of the Star's sports section. You get all the stories that appear in the print editions of the Star, plus additional stories that appear only on the website, and of course they appear first on kansascity.com. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless you cancel. How do you get it? You go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That's kansascity.com/sportspass2020. You want more than just sports coverage? Check out the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional national news, sports, and business coverage that comes with the e-edition. The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. If you're having trouble hunting down any of the offers, you send me an email at bkerkhoff@kcstar.com and I will get you to the right place. So whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with another episode.